If you enjoy this content, please take a moment to rate and review it. Your feedback will greatly impact our ability to reach more people. Thank you. Episode 100.
Yes, we made it.
Yeah, and what an auspicious episode 100 we have.
Yeah.
We did not plan for episode 100 to be recorded the day after Election Day. We're recording this on Wednesday, November 7th. And the whole world knows that the results are in, at least for the presidential and the Senate. I think they're still thrashing around on the House. And so by the time you listen to this, maybe or maybe not, that will have been figured out. But there's no question in terms of the both popular and electoral college votes for president. Donald Trump is the president-elect. And I think it's, if from the perspective of everyone worried about civil war, the victory was so decisive. I don't think there's any concern about that anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I was pretty shocked. I think everyone was pretty surprised at how big Trump's win was.
Yeah.
But the silver lining in that is that he won the popular vote, he won the electoral college, he won everything without. Even if there was some election somewhere that had a question or a few ballots, it doesn't matter.
Right.
At this point.
Yeah, I think so many people were worried, this thing is no way it's going to be done in 24 hours. It's going to drag on for weeks. Like that was kind of the default narrative, right? And we don't have that, right?
Yeah.
We have clarity on what's going to happen. Right. So I think that is a good thing. And, look, we're going to spend a very short amount of time running through a couple of stories. And then I want to spend our episode 100 kind of looking back over the last 99 episodes that we've done in the healthcare world we knew and the venture capital world we knew. And there were enough twists and turns in that, over the last year and a half that we've been doing the show. And holy cow, it feels like we are in for a wild roller coaster ride.
Yes. The next 6 months, I think, are going to be pretty wild.
Yeah.
A lot of change. It's unclear we have lots of opinions, but none of them are validated because it's only 24 hours in. But
Agree.
A lot of change.
Agree. But I do think some things are definitive, and and I think those things that are definitive will both be attributed to the election results as well as things we can kind of start to bank on now, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So we'll hash all that out. So with no further ado, episode 100, let's dig in. All right, so let's start with the actual results, Vic.
Yeah, so I think probably most people know Trump won. Right now there's a couple states still outstanding, but 295 electoral college votes are in his camp. He needs 270 to win. So obviously it's finished. He might get to 306. Either way, he won by a lot.
Yeah. Decisive win. The Senate.
The Senate is, I think, pretty clearly between 52 Republicans. It could get up to 54.
Right.
But there are two pretty moderate Republicans from Maine and Alaska that, if they only have 52, they're gonna have kind of like a Joe Manchin in reverse, where you're gonna have to go through these moderate Republicans to get anything done. If they're able to get to 53 or 54, they'll have a little more
leverage.
Yeah.
All right, so let's hop over to the markets. I think the first thing I looked at when I woke up this morning was the markets. I didn't look at the actual count results. I knew Trump won, so I was like, I don't need to see the numbers on that.
Right.
But I wanted to see how is the market responding.
Yeah.
And really interesting. All the markets were up, but the Russell 2000 index was up 8%.
Yeah.
On the day.
Yeah, it's 8% today.
Yeah.
So on
day over day.
The day. Right, exactly. Which is very surprising to me. I think it's a view that the markets have that I share, that there's going to be a lot of benefits to U.S.-based companies, and the Russell has been pretty beaten up. It hasn't gotten all the kind of growth this year that the S&P 500 or NASDAQ has gotten. And so I think there'll be some benefits to all companies that are for profit in the U.S. But I think it was sort of a catch up. Like, well, rising tide is going to lift all these boats, and the Russell's a little behind.
I feel that this is a lot of vindication for what we've been talking about for many, many episodes now, which is we're in the early stage venture capital stack. Mm-hmm. The companies we're investing in are smaller companies. If one day they get to an exit, it's likely they're either going to be in a roll-up or a small cap company, right? Much more likely they'd be in the Russell than the S&P.
Yeah, right.
Right. And I think our market segment has really been depressed for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's because there's been so much consolidation at the top of the stack because we can't have M&A activity happening, right? So when we don't have M&A activity happening, it's actually the smaller companies that struggle and suffer. There's no liquidity, there's no exits, there's no turnovers, there's no return of capital, and everyone else can just buy the Mag 7 on the public market. So it's like, why would you even play with the private markets? There's no alpha there, right? There's no upside to doing it.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines that would like to do M&A. I think there'll be, one of the predictions that's not very controversial is there's going to be a lot of M&A activity in the next year. That's sort of pent up. There's boards that, have ideas about corporate development, but they haven't wanted to fight through the regulation of the FTC and DOJ.
Yeah.
I think it'll benefit small cap. It's going to benefit our portfolio. It's going to benefit the business environment broadly. And the other thing that I think is pretty different in the Russell or our portfolio compared to the large cap is you're subject to regulation. You don't have ability to capture regulators. You're not lobbying. You don't have the girth.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's right.
some small businesses can group together, but it's not like Apple or Google or Amazon lobbying for something. And so cutting regulation, I think, really helps the smaller companies and the venture-backed companies.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the response from the street was buy up Russell.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the opportunity you want to front run. And that, quite frankly, the S&P and the Dow kind of had the Trump win priced in.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the Russell didn't have it priced in.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. And then this article in the Wall Street Journal, they cover yields and ETFs, but they do talk about winners and losers. Big tech and crypto, Tesla stock, shot through the roof.
Yeah.
Today, Nvidia did very, very well as well. Crypto,
Bitcoin's all-time high.
All-time high, yeah. And the fast follower to Bitcoin right now is Solana, and it had like 20% jumps on the day over day. Yeah, 20%, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think a Trump win in this manner is somewhat a risk on.
It's a clear signal that we're risk on. Right. It's definitely a very economic oriented vote. Right. Like that is the core issue. And so I think that's why the markets is the place to look to see what the response is. Conversely, there's a clear view that tariffs are coming.
Yeah.
And so if you're a tariff exposed company, those shares dropped. And so think, Best Buy, Williams-Sonoma, Nike, Target, all of those stocks took a pretty big hit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I think this was I think it was an economic election. Like, in my view, part of the attraction to Trump is if you're not happy with the economic environment today, I just want something different.
Yeah.
And whether I agree with everything Trump says or not, probably no one agrees with everything he says.
Right.
But I'm falling behind, especially the lower part of the K, the lower income, less educated.
Yeah.
They are suffering. And so I think the financial market is reading what I think is going to happen, which is there'll be stimulus, tax cuts, the Fed stimulus, there'll be regulation cuts, and hopefully it will get to the general population, but it's going to go through financial assets as a first stop because that's what always happens.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. The Fed prepares a rate cut amid economic contradictions.
Yeah, so it's a previously scheduled Fed meeting tomorrow. It is highly anticipated they will do a 25 basis cut.
Yeah, okay.
I do not expect Chairman Powell to change his direction based on something like an election. I think he wants to say he's data driven, and I expect he'll do a 25 cut.
Yep, I agree with that. We are seeing articles starting to explore what a Trump administration will bring to healthcare. I think we have to see whether or not this is going to be a sweep or not. If this is a sweep, it's going to be a very, very different story than even what this story is focused on.
Yeah.
This is just really focused on the regulatory agencies, not sort of the full stack of what could happen.
Yeah, this is based on
through
what
the legislature.
What could the president do without Congress?
That's right. That's right.
There is a, I don't know, 50-50 or even 60-40 chance that the Republicans will get the House.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, right now people are scrambling a little bit and trying to read tea leaves because Trump has not been abundantly clear about his views on healthcare. Maybe they're trying to pull his playbooks off the shelf from his 2016 run, but it seems like the payers did pretty well in the markets, with a view that the deregulation will actually kind of reverse course for Medicare Advantage, because it's more pushing risk, capitated.
Yeah, it's
and
more market based.
It is market based
kind of approach, which I think Trump is on record of saying he prefers.
Yeah, so that's a win for insurers, just given what's happened over the last 12 months.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So
one of the
kind
things
of a rebound, if anything.
Right. One of the things that this article does that I'm not ready to do is to take some of the programs in the Project 2025 Republican document and project that Trump will do those things. I think he might do some of those things, but I don't think it's going to be that one-to-one. I think there's been so much noise and things around that. It's going to emerge, I think, a little differently.
I agree, and I think that the swiftness of the win, to me, shows the strength of Trump, right? And not necessarily the strength of the Heritage Foundation or any of these other groups, right? And so I don't believe he's beholden to any plans or agreements or any of those kinds of things. I'm not saying they're off the table, but I'm saying he's sufficiently strong to do whatever it is he wants to do, right?
Yes.
If he decides he wants to execute that plan, then that's fine. But it's not clear to me that that's actually what he is going to do.
Yeah,
So,
and I don't have inside knowledge more than anyone else, but I have been reading a bunch about it. I think he's learned a lot from 2016 and is really trying to build his team ahead of time in a much more kind of buttoned up, understand all the bureaucracy that you're going to have to work with, as opposed to 2016. He maybe just came in. Not that he was unprepared, but it was a much more rushed, put something together.
I mean, at the end, based on how many people came and went through that through that term, I mean, it was kind of the B team, right?
Yeah.
It really wasn't put together that well. I think if you're looking in on the front end of this run and what this term is shaping up to be, it's a lot more like the A team. The people that he's got around him, just pure talent, proof of execution, and proof of ability to lead full organizations on their own, multiple organizations in some cases. It's just stronger from a talent perspective. So,
I think that's right. He also has 8 years or whatever, a lot of years where he now knows people in these circles more.
Yeah.
So he knows who he trusts and who he wants to work with a much stronger conviction, I think, than previously.
Yeah, yeah. So this article assumes that Medicaid is going to get knocked back a peg. That's not entirely clear to me. I don't see why Medicaid would not move in a very similar direction to Medicare from a Medicare Advantage view. Why it would not just become more sort of market based and more, hey, let's capitate and let's bring in innovation and bring in new players. So I don't know. I mean,
I think we're already seeing a trend, at least in private markets, for carving out particular disease states or types of population or geographies in Medicaid, accepting risk for a particular population and then having to deliver.
Yeah.
And I do not think it makes sense in any world to cut back Medicaid, which is, for the poor and the children. I mean, I just don't think no politician is going to, that's a hard thing to cut. I don't see how that gets cut. Now, reorganized, brought to more market-based things, maybe fewer bureaucracies, fewer people in the bureaucracy, maybe try to save some money on how it's managed, any of those things. But I don't think they're going to really cut back on the spend, on the benefits.
Yeah. Conversely, if you have a sweep, especially after the failure to do so in his first term, the ACA could be really impacted.
Well, certainly the expansion side, the expansion states, I think many of the reasons that some states didn't expand is they're worried about the federal subsidy ending at some point.
Yeah, but
I think that's could happen.
I mean, I think also some of the penalties, right, that show up in the tax code as far as like the requirements to have coverage. I think those things could also be impacted because it's not entirely clear to me that those things are the most celebrated aspects of the ACA, right? Having a marketplace is one thing. Having being forced to purchase something on that marketplace, which then creates an incentive for the prices to be higher because it's a forced buyer.
Yeah, I think that was a negotiated settlement with the payers. Like, if you're going to have to allow anyone to come on without any precondition exclusions,
right, then
everyone's got to have insurance all the time. Otherwise, I'll just wait until something happens and then I'll sign up then.
Yeah.
But yes, it could. It's all going to be on the table to be looked at.
I think that in particular is going to be on the table. This article, I think, is similar. So we'll just put it in the show notes. CVS holding back guidance as it outlines plan to right the ship at Aetna.
Yeah, so they had earned their earnings today, and they beat earnings, and it seemed fine given all the trouble they've had. It was fine, but as it says, they declined to give any forward guidance, and then their MLR ratio of 95 is rough.
That's rough.
Now, I know David Joyner a little bit. I think when you first come in as CEO, the first earnings call, you want to just throw all the garbage, anything you can find,
for sure,
and blame the person that you took over from 2 weeks ago.
That's right.
And so my guess is that they put like all the things they could put in to make this earnings, rough.
I mean, especially if you compare it with a beat.
Yeah, right.
If you can do those two things, that's a pretty, all things considered,
you
that's
beat
a pretty
earnings,
good call.
but your MLR is 95.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. All right, so I think for me the big story as it pertains to Trump and healthcare is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I don't think there's any question that RFK Jr. is a meaningful contributor to the Trump win in terms of putting his entire influence that he had built largely with an independent, sort of fed up with the two-party system base and bringing them over to the Republican vote. That was meaningful because he wasn't going to win, but he was starting to claw away.
Right.
He was starting to claw away votes at a meaningful clip.
Yeah,
they made him a player.
Yeah, no question. And he leveraged that into a role in the Trump administration.
Right.
But before we get to that, I think one of the things that in hindsight I'm thinking that Trump really did differently this time is empower really high-profile surrogates like Robert Kennedy, like Elon Musk, like Joe Rogan.
Yes.
And
Dana White.
Yeah, that really paid off for him because people follow those folks. And
And a pretty different strategy than the Democrats. I mean, we're already starting to review the election and the campaigns, but different strategy from the Democrats, who kind of went the celebrity route, which is not the same as like high-powered, influential people,
right,
and business people.
Yeah, I mean, people love Taylor Swift or Beyonce. I mean, she had a whole long list of them.
You name them, right?
But you don't think they are great about a particular deep part of policy. They're just not known for that.
Right.
And not that Joe Rogan is an expert at things, but people listen to his podcasts religiously.
Oh my God.
And the people that listen really respect Joe Rogan's comments. And so he is an influencer around how to think about things in a way that an entertainer, I think, is just not. I mean, Rogan is certainly entertaining, but he does it in a way that is kind of more information based, maybe. I'm not sure.
Look, I mean, I think we're talking about celebrities. We're talking about these very, very influential, credible people. Like, Elon Musk is credible. Mm-hmm. Dana White is credible. Yeah.
Right.
Joe Rogan is credible. But I think also, the All In guys, right? I mean, All In was very early to this whole party. But I think also it's a true nail in the coffin for mainstream media. Mainstream media, I think, was in serious decline. CNN had sort of already fallen off a cliff, and MSNBC was maybe like the last standing bastion. But I think this morning MSNBC really is kind of like Dead Man Walking.
Yeah,
because how do you explain everything MSNBC tried to do throughout this campaign versus the power of a Joe Rogan? Right, versus the power of podcasts, versus the power
and the long
of
form.
social media.
I mean,
yes,
listening to Trump go on for an hour.
Right, no talking heads.
Yeah,
no 3-minute clips.
Yeah, right. And even if you don't like what he said in a 10-minute window, you got a much more in-depth view of what he would do over the next few years.
That's
and
right.
I think that's healthy for the democracy.
It's a bet. Look, podcasts are a better format.
Yes.
For media, period. They're just a better format. I mean, all the way around. And so this is something that Trump, and look, before Trump did it, RFK did it.
Right.
RFK was the first one on all the different podcasts, building his base via podcasts.
Right.
So anyway, the reason why I think he's so pivotal for us is he is the Trump influencer for healthcare.
Yes, that's right.
Right. He is the influencer. It's not clear, he's a lawyer and an activist and lobbyist and all those kinds of things. It's not clear that he has the background and experience or even desire maybe to directly run one of the agencies. But he's got very, very strong opinions and, I think arguably a very strong base of knowledge about the agencies as a collective, right? In particular, the FDA.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that, in this 14-minute video that we'll post, he's pretty clear about what his motivations are, which is try to address chronic disease, which I fully agree with. I mean, I'm not sure how to do that, but that's a good goal.
Sure.
Get our food to be more healthy, which is hard to argue with. I mean,
absolutely.
The case that in Europe, XYZ chemical is not allowed in McDonald's food, and we have it here.
Right.
I think that's pretty common sense. And then he's focused on I would say aligning incentives at CDC, FDA, HHS, so that if there's science to be done, the scientist that is reviewing it is not getting paid by the company that is sponsoring the trial, which, again, seems fairly straightforward. When he goes off and talks about fluorine in the water and vaccines, and he will go, and he does it in this talk, he has like pet projects that he wants to work on.
Right.
And he's kind of similar to Trump in that. He'll go off on a tangent And I don't know if fluorine in the water is good or bad, but we've had it for a long time, and it doesn't seem to be that bad, but maybe it's bad. But getting the incentives aligned, getting, sort of our standards right, addressing chronic disease in children, these are things that I think everyone can get behind.
I think you just brought up an interesting characteristic of many of the people who are around
the
Trump.
entire orbit. Yeah.
Which is competent, but all kind of with pet projects.
Yeah. If Elon could just stay
projects.
on message and stay the hell out of Twitter or X, he'd be great. He's an engineer or engineering visionary, but he has a pet project around media. And that's how they all are, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, I hat tip to Emily. And by the way, like, I woke up this morning. Emily was the first person who I Slacked with, and I said this to her, and I just want to say it on the show. I'm so grateful for the multi-year dialogue that we have had with her. We've been doing this since even before the pandemic.
Yeah,
talking to her, and I think it has given me so much important perspective, such that a day like today did not like left field me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. You're not overwhelmed by all of the things that could happen because you're grounded in kind of how it works.
Yeah, and she's really good at spotting things like RFK and Trump, and that RFK is the healthcare guy, and Trump is likely to, tap RFK way before any big articles come out about this. Like, she's, this is why we have her on every quarter. This is why you and I talk to her every week.
Right.
That's why we pay attention to what Hedgeye says. So anyway,
the thing I love about healthcare is the same thing that I hate about healthcare, that it's highly regulated, and the regulatory bodies are very strong because human life is at stake.
Right.
And so early on, you and I realized that, gosh, we need someone to help us with this. Probably 9 years ago when we started. And Emily's incredible at being able to take hundreds of pages of documents and tell you and I what it means.
Yeah.
But she said to me early on, meaning like 5 months ago, if Trump wins, food is going to be a healthcare topic. And that's right.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. Yeah. So anyway, there's going to be a lot to sort out because, running an election, winning an election is very different than governing, right? Then you get in there and you have to kind of figure out what you actually can get done within your term with the priorities. You got to clean up, you got to swap out teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So lot to kind of work through there. But RFK is going to be a key figure to watch.
Yeah. And the executive order thing, really probably, people had done it before, but Obama started really using it effectively, and every president has used it in a significant way. I think they're planning like 300 to 400 executive orders in the first couple of days. So it's going to be, now that won't be until January, but there's a lot.
Well, look, I was told that, whenever you step into an executive office, if you don't have your first 100 days completely planned out, you're a year behind.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me that they've got their agenda ready to go to start executing on day one.
Right.
It's not like it's his first rodeo.
Right.
He's going back to the White House.
Right.
So I would expect him to know what it is he wants to get done and what he can get done.
Right.
And to go ahead and get it done.
Yeah. And before we jump to this, did you watch the coverage last night at all? Just going back to the media topic for a second.
So Rachel and I had our date night, and we specifically wanted to not be in front of the TV.
Yeah, so it's not a good date night.
Yeah, so we went to dinner to a place that had no TVs.
Yeah.
And we had a good conversation, and then we came home, and I said, hey, I want to just kind of turn it on.
Yeah.
I turned it on, and I kind of went back and forth between MSNBC and Fox. I tried to actually watch the Amazon one, but it was so like low rent. I was actually pretty disappointed.
I liked the Amazon one.
Maybe when I turned it on, it was like they couldn't get the camera angles right or whatever, and I was just kind of like, I can't deal with this.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to bring up. For multiple elections, I've been flipping back and forth between right and left to try to get a coherent story.
Yeah,
and Amazon did a really good job bringing in true experts from each side, like someone that had worked in the Trump campaign until July. and someone that had worked in the Harris campaign until like September.
Okay.
And then they had a historian, and they had writers from, lots of places. The set was a little weird.
The set was wacky, man.
The set was strange.
Wacky. I mean, come on.
But the talent was good. I didn't have to flip around, which was really helpful.
You probably caught it at a good place. When I turned it on, I thought the person who Brian Williams was interviewing was not that interesting. And then the set was wacky.
Yeah.
And then there was a moment where he couldn't figure out where the camera was, or the camera could, I mean, he's the professional. He's been doing this for, decades.
Right.
They had some camera guy who couldn't get the camera.
Well, that's
on him
because
right.
the set was so bizarre.
It was, yeah. So with that, I was just like, okay, I can't sit through this. I'm just trying to get a feel for what's going on.
Yeah.
So I went back and forth between MSNBC and Fox only really once. I mean, I turned on MSNBC to start. I could already tell by their mood where it was headed.
Yeah, right.
So then I went to Fox. Fox had Harold Ford Jr. on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which was good. And so, Fox has actually kind of come a long way from the hardcore Tucker Carlson era. I mean, if you're watching Hannity or Laura Ingraham, you're going to get sort of the extreme stuff. But their main shows, they've actually moved, I think, more towards the center. They clearly have a right, conservative bent.
Yeah.
But it was actually pretty professional, I thought, the way that they were, representing everything. But once I kind of could tell what was happening, I think I watched in total 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I went and did laundry and went to bed.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just like, eh.
Well, it was just refreshing to have. I mean, I think Amazon very intentionally had it like 50-50. And then,
great.
Of course, the results came in the way they came in. Like
Sure.
James Carville, I think, couldn't stay on the set anymore because he was just sad.
Yeah.
And so they lost some people over the night. But in the first hour, it was pretty good.
Yeah. That's interesting about, James Carville and just the Democratic establishment, But anyway, let's cover this last story, and then we can have a sort of a more broad conversation. So Elevance says that the star rating snub cost them $375 million. I mean, that's a lot of money. I just think this. It's funny now, right? Like looking at this all in the context of this election, right? It feels like there was an overall agenda, and even maybe more importantly than agenda, a posture from the regulatory agencies that just did not make any friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That did not make any friends. I mean, we talk about it off the show in terms of the SEC and Gary Gensler and the entire crypto industry.
Yeah,
and
right.
look, the thing I think that people need to understand there is the crypto industry came together. They made the second largest PAC behind the Make America Great Again PAC, except for their PAC was totally dedicated to Senate races.
Right.
And it's like, look at what happened.
Right.
They flipped Ohio.
Yeah.
Who do you think flipped Ohio?
Yeah.
The crypto bros flipped Ohio.
Right.
Like, make no mistake. If they had the second largest PAC and it was entirely focused on the Senate, they flipped the Senate.
Yeah. And obviously I'm biased because I own crypto and I've been following it for a long time. My view, though, is that they really just want clear regulation.
No, well, this is my point, right? The regular, if you are tracking this, right, and I don't believe that the everyday American is tracking this,
right?
Okay, but
or a healthcare professional really is necessarily tracking.
That's right. But when you look at the league of, ultra rich and powerful people that flipped, that went from Democrat to Republican over the course of the last 18 months, when you look at that group, largely why did they do that?
Either SEC or FTC they weren't clear about what rules they were following. Like, I think most successful business people understand that there's regulations that need to be followed. when people get really mad and start donating to the other side to get particular people, the head of the SEC, the head of FTC, fired, it's because they are not being honest. They're not saying, like, here are the SEC needs to protect everyday Americans from things that aren't fair.
Of course.
But it doesn't need to just like be opaque about what is allowed and then say, we'll convict you if we decide to, but there's no clarity on what's allowed and what's not.
Right.
So I think if a really wealthy person feels like a bureaucracy is not in their favor, but also just not being clear and picking winners kind of randomly or whoever they happen to like that day, that's when they get really mad.
I mean, we talked about it when it happened. The Bitcoin conference this year happened in Nashville.
Yeah.
It was like a week or 2 weeks after the RNC, and it was basically the RNC part 2.
Yeah.
I mean, there were MAGA hats everywhere in town.
Yeah.
For the Bitcoin conference. This was a completely unforced error. There is no good policy reason. There's no good political alignment reason for the Democratic Party to be hostile towards Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
There's not a good reason for it.
The only reason is they don't understand it and they're scared. But that's not a reason.
That's
just
not
learn.
a reason.
Just learn. Like,
that's not a reason.
Yeah.
And so the fact that happened, and like, I don't think mainstream media covered it one time.
Right.
I don't think, I think the average person who's behind the Democratic Party did not understand the severity of that self-inflicted wound. Right. And why am I bringing this up with the Elevance stuff? Because you know what? I bet there's
the star rating's the same.
Yeah. Star ratings is the same. It's the same. It's like there was no warning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There was no warning. You guys just kind of came over the top.
And there's no clarity of how you get the stars you get or what the repercussions are. And so they're suing somebody to try to recoup this money.
They're going to win.
And they're going to win. And the reason I think they're going to win is because other insurers have won already.
Yeah, that's right. They're going to win. So I don't know. I mean, that's the last story we have because we wanted to have a short story show and really more talk about the changing winds. But gosh, I just can't get over the recklessness, the allowed recklessness. And this is really where I feel like the Biden administration deserves a lot of blame. You know, they allowed particular senators to have too much influence over the regulatory apparatus, and they created very powerful enemies. Very powerful enemies. And then they underestimated what those powerful enemies were going to do, you know? And I just feel like, gosh, did you need to make an enemy out of Elon Musk? I mean, because he didn't just like come up with all this stuff out of nowhere. It's like, let's talk about the fact that you snubbed him when you were convening all the electric car manufacturers. It's like, what is that even about?
I mean, he
what is
created the whole industry.
Yeah. Like, I don't care if you don't like him, but you didn't invite him to the convening.
Right.
It's like,
I think that's a union thing.
Yes. So Emily was bringing up the unions. And boy, does it feel like that's another big loser here.
Yes.
Right? Because if the unions are going to be the dominant financier of the Democratic Party, that's an anti-progress. That's an anti-progress paycheck, right?
Yeah.
And anti-progress ain't flying anymore.
Well, it was interesting that I think it was the Teamsters, for the first time ever, they didn't endorse a candidate for president. And I think it's because their membership was
Trump. Was
Trump.
Was
Trump. And so it'll be interesting to see how the unions evolve. I mean, there is a world where making products in the continental U.S. right here would be good for unions. as long as they are sort of collaborative with management and it works. I mean, there's a lot of nurses that are unionized. I want them to have a good work environment, fair hours, fair pay. I think probably all of our listeners want that. But it needs to be negotiated in a way that's collaborative, and it's fine for them to organize and collectively bargain as long as it doesn't become like not collaborative and more like of a hold up and try to take advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So Vic, this is episode 100.
Yeah.
We probably should have had Notebook LM tell us at a high level what we've been talking about for the last 100 shows, but
it remembers better than I do.
It does. But I mean, just thinking back thematically, how do you remember the last 99 conversations we've had, right? I mean, both with ourselves, but also with guests. I mean, how do you recall it?
My recollection is that it kind of evolved pretty organically. I mean, like you and I wanted to be able to keep up with the news cycle and dig in and not fall behind. And this was a good way to kind of hold ourselves accountable and read all the news and then come prepared to talk through it all. And then as we started going, we created, gosh, we should separate this into, okay, there is like a macro economy thing that maybe like in the 10th show or the 12th show, we started having categories of economy. I'm not going to get it in the right order. Policy, payers, providers. And then we added in AI and that kind of, what's it called? Like health about us thing. Because there are more like lifestyle things. My recollection is it sort of evolved to meet what we were interested in. And I've found it be really helpful in the rest of my week. So like I do this and I'm reading my normal things every day, but that is sufficient that I can talk with any investor that calls or maybe a portfolio company or a co-investor.
Right.
I pretty much know what the big stories are. Whereas previously I was having to fake it more. Like I would know a little bit, but I wouldn't know the details or wouldn't know enough. And so it's been really helpful from that point of view.
Yeah. I don't need to say anything more than you did because I've had the same experience. I think in terms of where we've focused, we've organized the show around, we always start with the markets, right? And I think generally speaking, what we've been talking about there, the Fed, we talked a lot about the Fed. We've started to wind that down as inflation has become less of an issue and also the Fed fund rate's starting to come back down. So that's starting to fade into the background a little bit. But gosh, it feels like for 75 of the 90 something episodes, it was like Fed, right? So I think it's interesting that is now starting to sunset and we're moving beyond that. We talked quite a bit about corporate real estate.
Yeah.
And I think that's not all worked through or worked out yet and something we're going to have to watch for in 2025. I did note that on the Wall Street Journal winners and losers thing that real estate was right under tariffs as a loser. So, I think there's still implications there around that asset class.
Yeah. Even though the Fed is cutting the Fed funds rate, the bond market, we talked about this last week, the bond market still is rising, if anything.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Fixed income is still performing, so that's an offset. So I think that's a theme I expect we will continue to cover over the next 100 episodes. I think corporate real estate we haven't figured it all out yet.
Yeah,
right?
Hopefully we'll cover in a way that it's resolving and not a crisis, but we'll see.
Well, but I mean the macro level trends around it, right? Whether it's inability to finance at previous valuations or remote work or those who are calling for people to go back into the office, but at the same time are shedding and constantly laying off people. So they're shrinking their footprint or headquarters moving all over the country from place to place. So certain markets
or technology, AI and machine learning, you don't need as many people.
That's right. So all of these things, I think, make that asset class, to me, still in flux. I think, for example, I think corporate real estate in Nashville is going to be fine.
Yeah.
Overall, right?
Because we have enough inbound movement.
Nashville, Austin, Texas, right?
Right.
You know, there are markets where I think it's going to be fine, but there are some questionable markets out there.
Yes.
And
there's a lot of buildings with a decent amount of debt in those markets.
Yeah. And then banks sort of underlie that. Mostly regional, but nonetheless banks, right? So I think that's something we'll continue to focus on. I think the K-shaped economy is another big theme that we covered, and that's going to be front and center. The interesting thing about a sweep is congratulations, now the entire problem is yours, right? So we will, if in fact it is a sweep, the entire economy will be in the hands of the Republican Party. And it will be interesting how many of the policies actually make their way to Main Street in a beneficial way. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think for you and I, my gut tells me the Trump administration and a Republican win for matters of increasing capital flows and easing fears about taxes on capital gains. Mm-hmm. I think for our industry, my view is it's likely going to be good. Yeah, I think getting the FTC and the DOJ out of the business of blocking mergers left and right. Yeah. I think for all of those reasons, it helps our industry. But again, we are, at least in the top 2% of the American public by even being in the venture capital game, right? Yeah. So when we're talking about the other 98, that will remain to be seen. That will remain to be seen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, so my wife was frustrated about the election. I don't think she'd be upset with me saying that. I think a lot of women were because of the abortion issue. Yeah. Which I don't think there'll be a nationwide anything on abortion.
No, it's breaking down to the states. Right. I mean, that's
the fear that my wife and others have. I don't think that's real. But fear is not a rational emotion. But we were talking about this last night because it's clear Trump was going to win. And what I said to her, I think reminds me with the K-shaped economy. There were, something like 70 million people that are so frustrated with whatever they're seeing out there with the status quo that they wanted to change. And you're right, now Trump is going to have the opportunity to make a difference for those people. And it's difficult to get the money, the jobs, the benefits to them effectively, quickly, so that we only have 2 years before the midterm elections. And so the question is, what can he do quickly enough to benefit that lower part of the K? I think the upper part of the K, where you and I are, and our assets and venture funds and M&A activity, I think it always kind of goes through the upper part of the K and then filters down.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that are really frustrated with the American dream maybe isn't really that realistic anymore. And one of the things that I really like about this show, that as you were talking about the Fed and real estate, a lot of these topics are kind of intertwined. Yeah. In a way that they all kind of interrelate in different ways, and there's puts and takes, and it's really helpful to be able to just kind of process it in real time every week because there's a lot of nuance there.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are fed new information every week. A new story comes out, right? And we have to try to fit it into our scaffolding. Yeah, or break our scaffolding apart because we try to fit it in and it goes, nope, that doesn't fit. Right. So got to tear it all down and let's try to rebuild it again. Right. Let's try to get a framework for how we understand the world to be. One other thing inside of the markets that we or the economy is we talked about unions. And labor and strikes. There was a lot of strikes. Of strikes over the course of the 9,900 episodes. I mean, even today, we didn't talk about it, but Boeing strike.
Yeah, Boeing strike settled today.
Was resolved. Right. So I think both from a union political perspective and also from a striking AI, labor, wages, overall economy, inflation perspective, I expect that to continue to be a story. I think.
Yeah, I mean it's it's a cultural shift right there. I mean, to me, it comes down to inflation and deficits. Like, we have systematically high inflation. Now, it's not, I don't think it's going to be 7, 8, 9% anytime soon, but I also don't think we're likely to see 2%.
Right.
We're going to be in that like 2 to 5%. And that is really hard on day-to-day folks that need to get a paycheck and then buy their food, pay their rent, get gas for their car, and they don't have that much left over at the end. There's a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck, and inflation just eats into what they can buy.
Yeah.
And with the way that the government spends money and goes into deficits, it's difficult to stop that because you're creating more M2 money all the time. And I don't see Trump really solving that. It'd be great if he cuts government spending massively. I just don't think many politicians can do that.
I don't anticipate in the next 4 years that government spending gets cut massively.
Right. So we're going to have high inflation.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a challenge. Now, maybe we can...
Plus, we're going to have the results of tariffs.
Yes. Right.
Which is going to be another weird form of inflation.
Yes.
It's going to be segmented, right? But...
Yeah. And so the hope is that we grow faster than inflation and we kind of grow our way out of it. That's possible.
That's not a terrible theory.
That's the recipe that would work.
Yeah, that's not a terrible theory.
Right. And it just has to be a lot of growth. I mean, we got to grow at, the economy needs to grow at 6% if inflation is 3%.
Yeah.
And so that'd be great. And either way, I think investing in healthcare innovations in the U.S., there's so much change that's going to happen, and it's going to be a fun next couple of years to be sort of in the middle of it and investing in new companies that are, riding these waves.
So to me, tell me if I'm missing anything, but I feel like that really kind of, we talk GDP and JOLTS and, the kind of the measurements that come out. But to me, those were the main themes that we would talk about on a regular basis.
Yeah, and then the whole economy. AI topic.
Well, no. I'm just talking about
just the economy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Those are the big themes of the economy. Definitely.
Okay. So let's go to policy.
Yeah.
So I feel like in policy, we talked FTC.
Yeah.
A lot. I expect major changes there.
Yeah.
I feel like we talked CMS largely around physician fees, Medicare Advantage. Really, those two things, right? Physician fees and Medicare Advantage.
Is CMS breaking sort of the connection with FDA approval?
Oh, that one too. Yes,
especially around digital health was really the big topic there.
Yes, but Alzheimer's and just generally speaking, misalignment.
Yes, right.
Between those two agencies,
right,
was a big thing. And then I guess also you could talk about. I mean, this kind of came from on high, but you could also talk about the prescription drug negotiations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That definitely it was definitely a policy that had a big effect.
Yeah. So those were some big things. I think, gosh, I mean, what was those feel like kind of the big things we talked about. I mean, the FTC thing was such a big, massive theme. Constantly mergers being blocked.
Yeah.
Constantly mergers being blocked, especially for health systems. Mergers being blocked left and right. Private equity, a lens on private equity, which I expect will reverse.
Yeah.
I think, you want to talk about an enemy that you didn't necessarily need to make.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of checks came from big private equity CEOs and managing directors into the Trump campaign. And so I expect private equity to be in favor with the regulatory bodies and, merge away, buy away, roll up away, right? What else in policy do you remember?
I think those are the big things. I mean, there was something about getting care in rural markets to be functional, getting enough reimbursement, but it's not a policy that has really been answered. There's lots of problems out there. But Nashville's got some people who have been working on it. Brad Smith maybe most prominently,
And
that's one of the things that's interesting.
People who have relationships with the Trump
I was going to say, there's a
administration.
bunch of people in town that we know that already are connected in that I think would be great, that know a lot about healthcare. Robert Kennedy is wonderful, but Brad Smith knows a lot more how it actually works.
Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of covers policy on the health system side. I think the successful sort of launch of Risant Health.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. To me, that to me is the big story in health systems and where that's going to go. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's the. I think we started the show with this theme that the payvider model,
yes,
was the model to look at for the future.
Yes,
and Risant sort of has then emerged as the biggest, very well run, and they're about to be a nationwide player. That, I mean, of course, they already have both coasts, so that is probably.
Well, I think the important thing about Risant was it was taking best of breed nonprofits, like, great brands, Kaiser and Geisinger, right? Okay, these are two top tier brands from different coasts.
Yeah.
And saying we're going to build this best of breed brand, nonprofit, national, not super regional. You literally went coast to coast, and now you're national at that point. Payvider, right?
Right.
And I think that was an innovation to decide you wanted to go do that, right?
Yeah, and there was no national payvider before that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very large nonprofit systems, but I don't think Ascension, Common Spirit have any significant payer sides.
No. There are obviously payviders on the payer side, but like from the health system side, no.
Yeah.
No. Everything is a regional for the most part.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was a big one.
I mean, the labor issues were really a big issue
when we started,
and then
they got turned around.
Yeah,
they got turned around. I mean, huge holes were dug out of by Ascension, Common Spirit, kind of across the board.
Yeah,
I mean.
Even HCA, LifePoint, Tenet, they all had.
Well, they weren't really digging out of holes. They were just tuning up performance, right? But the nonprofits,
from the labor, like the pay rates, and being able to attract nurses and not have to have travelers, and the model doesn't work if you can't get nurses in the building.
Yeah, I mean, all the post-pandemic haze, that the systems had to go through, they came out on the other side of it.
Yeah,
and they're pretty strong. Look, Steward Health.
Yeah.
Obviously, a big story on the health system side of things.
Yeah, that's an interesting story because I agree with you. Picking a fight with private equity was an unforced error.
Well, broadly,
and I think that example, I think it was legal, but it was not that ethical. It was a hard set of transactions.
Agree.
Over a several year period of time.
Well, and also, I think at this point, clearly, the CEO is lacking some scruples. I mean,
very unethical.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it was illegal, but not ethical.
No, yeah, right. Really pretty problematic. Okay, I think on the payer side, Medicare Advantage to me feels like the biggest story of the last 100 episodes. I think the payers were just kind of riding high and doing great. And then all of a sudden the star ratings thing came and they all sort of had to deal with it. And then maybe secondarily, the Medicaid redeterminations. That's been more of a recent thing as, those roles have been dropping over the last 3 or 4 months here. But those feel like the top two stories there. And also maybe just a recognition, and this goes back to your payvider point, that the pure hospital business, unless it is like for profit and optimized in great markets, right, with unfair advantages, or the pure health insurance business is challenged.
Yes.
You really, in most cases, excluding HCA and, Tenet, and LifePoint,
they have very carefully curated their network of hospitals.
And they have significant scale. You have to have real scale to be able to make it work. But in most cases,
I think Ascension does a pretty good job.
yeah, Ascension's got a lot of scale.
Yeah, right.
But in most cases, the pay-vider model really does appear to be the model of the future. And I think that was one thing we saw Anthem turn into Elevance over the course of these last 99 episodes, right? I mean, we watched that transformation happen. We've watched Carillon get built up over the course of the last year and a half.
Yeah, so Anthem to Elevance really did an excellent job taking the United Optum kind of playbook and running it
fast,
very fast, but with great execution.
Yeah. And
Cigna and Evernorth, they had like the concept, but they just haven't really been able to execute.
Yeah.
So then the other thing on the payer side is the retail, like the CVS, Walgreens, all those aspects have been very negative. It's just been an anchor around them. It's been
beat up for the entire time we've been doing the show. Drugstores, beat up the whole time.
It doesn't, I mean, urgent care can work if it's a feeder into a health system that can monetize the higher acuity patients.
That's right.
When you're running a urgent care minute clinic kind of thing in a retail setting, you don't have that referral, that doesn't make sense. And yet CVS, Walgreens, Amazon, Walmart, they all have done various interactions of them, but none of them have worked.
Yeah. We watched basically the implosion of physician staffing.
Yes. Yeah.
Full on implosions there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, companies went bankrupt.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. The No Surprises Act, I think it was well-intentioned and probably good overall, but it had that effect on especially emergency rooms.
Yeah, it attacked an already weakening segment of the market that always had weak credit ratings, and that's a bad combination. That business model was always kind of on the brink in a way I don't think we fully understood.
Right.
And No Surprises really blew it away. Right. So yeah, that was a big one.
And then I think there's been a lot of consolidation in payer markets. Like just you need to have scale.
Yeah.
And then you really probably need to have their version of payviders having Optum or services data as a unregulated source of both data and insight, but also margin.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you can operate inside of a market. So like think about like Guidewell, Florida Blue, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're strong payer in that market with a bunch of other assets that sort of all work together. They don't need to necessarily be, 3, 4, 5 states kind of all pulled together. It's operating pretty well.
Yeah, the Blues have the association where they can get, the contract power across the country if needed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. Okay, I think that kind of covers all that. VC markets. We talk about VC markets.
Yeah, that's been wild during the show. I mean, it was like to the moon and then it cratered and now we're sort of crawling back. Yeah. Today, I think the deals mostly look like a barbell of mega deals and a bunch of seed deals happening. Right.
The A and B deals largely kind of coming from the same names. I think that's been, I don't know how I really square that trend, but every week when we would sort of say, okay, here's a $30 million deal, for example, it's like the same players.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, maybe 10 different firms that are all co-investing together. So that part feels a little concerning to me.
Yeah, the venture model, I think maybe A can work, but B, C growth is hard. Without the IPO markets like fully on, I don't know how it really works.
Well, I mean, okay, now let's fast forward to the next 100 episodes. Like, what do you anticipate in a Trump administration in terms of IPO markets and M&A? I mean, I expect them to be back on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be risk on.
I expect them to be risk on. Yeah.
And healthcare is really interesting because Trump is going to be very aggressive with tariffs. It's going to cause all kinds of chaos in supply chains, and healthcare is fairly protected in that. Now, there may be some pharmaceutical aspects that we work through, but But of the $4 trillion, a lot of it is U.S. buyers giving them, buying something from a U.S. based group.
Mm-hmm.
I think the markets are going to be risk on IPOs. I mean, there's several healthcare IPOs kind of gearing up for Q1 with the hope of a Trump win.
Yeah.
And I don't have an interest in any of them, but I want them to do well so that the whole
for the whole market, for the benefit of the whole market, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, fingers crossed that we do go risk on.
Yeah.
That would be
good
great
for our portfolio.
I mean, look, we're sitting on over 160 companies at this point, right?
Right.
I mean, and they're all working really hard, but when capital is not flowing, I mean, it's hard to make step changes, right? I mean, so you kind of have to incrementally grow based on performance and EBITDA and things of that nature. And, it's just a slow way to go for an early stage company.
Yeah. And our portfolio is similar to 100 other VCs. We have better quality maybe, but there's a lot of assets that, we have some that are net income positive and should be sold. They have no business remaining a small,
that's right,
$40 million moderately profitable company. They need to, it's not really a company, it's a product. And the venture industry needs to sort of cash that out and then recycle the funds to LPs, and then they'll invest in new funds, and it all works. I don't know, COVID kind of, made everything a little bit crazy for probably 5 years.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're on the other
side of that.
Right.
Yeah. And then I guess really AI is the last big theme. And, it's interesting, right? I mean, how much really happened in AI over the course of 99, 100 episodes? I mean, models got vastly better, but because usage is so unevenly distributed, it's hard to really measure the impact of the models getting so much better.
Yeah.
Version over version, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I
like, how do we feel that in the economy, right? I mean, I don't know that we have yet.
Yeah. I'm very interested in sort of trying out things and keeping my fingers in it. And over 100 episodes, ChatGPT 3 was incredible. And maybe like 2 Christmases ago, I was playing with it, and it was magic.
Yeah.
Like, you put in something and it gave you a story or whatever, a joke.
Yeah.
And today don't know how it works.
Right.
But then as we've evolved, there's been, I don't know, maybe $1 trillion invested. There's a lot of money invested, hundreds of billions of dollars. And it's incrementally better. But the interface to like plug it in and have it do work that now I don't have to do, that's not really here yet.
But doesn't it feel like 2025 it will be? Like, it feels to me like throughout 2024, I saw AI get baked in, maybe in not awesome ways, but baked into every piece of software we use at work.
That's right.
Everyone. Yeah. HubSpot, Asana.
Yeah, all the SaaS tools.
Everything in G Suite.
Right.
It's now AI enabled.
Yeah.
Now, how often do we use it? Not that often,
Right.
But it's in there, right? And we know people who are at these companies trying to figure out how to make it all work. And I think next year we'll start to see it actually be more seamlessly integrated into workflow as they've done the market and user research and figured out, man, right here, stick the AI right in this bit of the workflow, and it is going to have like a 3x, efficiency rating or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar to me to the internet. In 93, 94, 95, there were like very niche-y use cases where it was powerful, but only for this one like particular thing that most people didn't care about. But if you were doing that, so like Notebook LM is really good if you have 10 to 40 sources that you want to have a body of knowledge and interact with for a period of time. But it doesn't really export to any kind of database. It's not doesn't go anywhere, but for that use case, it's really good. And I think we're going to start to see more and more little niche use cases in 2025. Whether we get the first like big breakout use case, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people have been talking about agents for 18 months.
Well, okay, but I mean, they've really been talking about it for like the last 4 months, right? I mean, that's the point of us watching this stuff.
There's hype. There was hype before that, but it wasn't real.
It wasn't even remote. It was actually conceptual.
Yeah.
16 months ago. It was like, hey, here's this idea that we have.
Right.
Before they had multimodal,
when was
before
the first
anything.
it was a coding one that really was Devin.
Devin. Yeah.
That was probably 8 months ago.
Yeah.
And it's not widely available now, but it, I guess it works. So yeah, I think we're likely to have the first really breakout use case where I don't know if it's a insurance, like a healthcare insurance medical director or a physician, that now doesn't have to spend 5 hours a week coding, or a VC making sort of investment decisions. Some use case where you can say, okay, I now have this tool that allows me to do a lot more or more high value work.
The other thing is back to the idea that it's not evenly distributed. There is a difference between taking a legacy company and trying to AI enable it versus creating an AI native company from day one.
Yes, much easier to create.
And look,
that's what we do.
I mean, you want a perfect example of that? Our podcast producer. You and I aren't feeling it. But there's a lot of AI going into the production
into this show.
Yeah, like the production of this show.
Yes,
there's a lot of AI going on.
I mean, I don't fully know. I think Aaron probably has like 70% of the work is.
I think so.
Is quasi-automated. Quasi-automated.
Yes,
he moves it to another step in the process, and then it goes.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Right, and so 2025. Really, I think will be where we will see the first wave, not blips here and there, but the first wave of VC-backed AI native, AI first companies.
Yes.
It's hard to like retrofit AI into a non-AI native company, but there's going to be some low cost of capital companies.
I mean, I'm seeing it in my portfolio, which are not old companies, right? And maybe an example, I don't want to use the name, but maybe 4 years old, they have spent $20 million on their technology platform, and they used the money reasonably well
for the time.
And you could do it for a tenth of that now, maybe even less than that, just because you don't need all those people. You don't need all of that coding. And so, what I refer to as technical debt, just like there's technology that you have invested in at the sunk cost, and you need to have a pathway to get rid of it. But it's really hard, even for a venture-backed company that's 4 years old, to do that. For the larger companies with all these employees, I mean, it's the innovator's dilemma. They're not going to be suited for that, which is, it's good for our new investments, but there's a lot of mid-stage private companies that, the company's worth $30 million, but they raised 120.
Yeah.
And so,
well, what I think is going to happen to those companies if they want to survive, this kind of goes right back to the economy one, is they may have to just swap out divisions, right? So one thing they might do is they might buy one of these AI native companies that fulfills an entire function in their business and lay off, an equivalent of labor. One time, CapEx replacement for, perennial OpEx.
Yeah. Our finance department is now replaced with this.
Yeah. Either a SaaS tool or you bought something.
Right. Yeah, I think that could happen in 2025.
I think
it might be 18 months, but it's fast. It's kind of fast.
I think it's going to happen. I mean, we already saw Klarna kind of, lead on this with the whole customer service call center stuff.
Right.
I think it's going to become commonplace. We're already in a market. And this is one of the most interesting things about this environment we're in politically. It goes back to the K-shaped economy. We're in this environment where a lot of the layoffs are white collar.
Yes.
And that is actually quite palatable in a populist political environment. Do you see people crying for all these tech workers that are getting laid off? I don't.
No.
I don't see anybody crying about it. And so that's a really interesting dynamic that we have at play that enables some of these ultra rich people, whether they be the leaders of high tech companies like Elon Musk or, who just raised $4 billion for XAI.
Yeah.
You're trying to tell me that AI is not going to be labor consuming? Like it's not going to eat up jobs?
Oh yeah. It's going to destroy jobs.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course it is. Right. There's no way it's not going to, but it's interesting that he can be positioned as the populist leader on one hand, and on the other hand, raise $4 billion for XAI, which is going to end up destroying jobs. Why? Well, because the jobs that are being destroyed are not really from the populist group, right? I mean, this is the whole college-educated, non-college-educated divide that we've got going on that showed up in this election.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's there's a lot of white collar, $100,000 a year jobs that won't exist in 12 months, 24 months. And so if you're 35 years old and you're an accountant or a software engineer, what do you do? I mean, I really don't know. It's not a rhetorical. I mean, you're 30. I mean, the reason I picked 35 is you've invested in your career for 15 years, but there's not mid-level white collar jobs there. There might be senior jobs to help interpret things or use judgment, but then the rest of the jobs are going to be very limited.
Yeah.
And we're going to need to find something for these people to do that gives them purpose. Forget the money. I mean, you can give them basic income or whatever. I mean,
look, they are highly skilled people as a general statement, right? So the question is really like, how do you repurpose or redirect?
What should they do?
Those skills in this new economy. And the other thing, I was on the Ring of Five group text, which has been pretty quiet today, I have to say, in the wake of the election, but my little, pithy comment was that I can feel the acceleration already. We haven't talked about the whole e-acceleration movement. Do you remember when that was like kind of a whole the whole EAC thing? It was.
I don't know what this is.
Okay, so
behind
it's largely on Twitter, but there's a whole movement. For short, it's called EAC, and it's I think it's a play off of the whole effective altruism movement.
Okay.
And it basically is saying we need to just accelerate. For a minute there, Mark Andreessen was like, all EAC. That's why I didn't know if
okay.
But the idea here is when there was a lot of dooming going around the AI thing, this EAC thing was how the pro AI people were
sort of. That's what their cover.
Their response was, we need to accelerate as fast as possible because AI has the potential to, solve world hunger, has the potential to solve our energy crisis, has the potential to create world peace.
And let's not operate from fear.
Correct. We need to accelerate as fast as possible. And yes, there are going to be some jobs lost, blah, 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 blah. And I if there's one visceral feeling that I have today, it's I can feel the acceleration. Like I can feel it's not just risk on, it's like speed on.
Yeah.
Things are about to get really fast, Vic. Like if people thought they were fast before, I think things are going to get so fast in 2025. And that's probably the scariest thing is you and I do this show every week. It helps us, I love the fact that we were able to just riff for, let's call it 45 minutes or whatever, and like try to recall, but we have scaffolding. We have a narrative.
Yes.
We have a way that we've been able to make sense of all this stuff. That's a privilege, man. Most people cannot do that.
Yeah.
Most people don't have the time, the thought partner,
and then you wake up
incentives
after a month and the world's different. And you don't have the tools to know where to start.
Yeah, and the people that just won want to accelerate it.
Yes,
I think that's the thing. I know what they want to do, and they want to go really, really fast.
Yeah, and what was really surprising to me is the lower part of the K does too. Or I don't know if they do or not, but they voted for it.
It feels to me like the lower part of the K wants change.
Something different. Like, this is not working. Just let's throw the table over and we'll figure out something else.
Yeah, it's a little more like that. But I don't know that they
might be careful what you wish for, perhaps. But it's maybe better than just status quo, putting your head in the sand and acting like this stuff doesn't exist.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm not going to play the role of I know better than the majority that just voted for the
yeah.
So let's see. Let's see where this all goes. But my feeling was certainly one of
I'm in
visceral
favor
feeling of acceleration.
Is it EAC?
Yeah, EAC. Yeah,
I'm an EAC as opposed to a doomer. Definitely. I'm a venture capitalist. Like, I believe that we will figure it out. Not that there won't be problems, but that we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I am as well. I want to be thoughtful. There was all this kind of like, DEAC, like, I don't know, decelerating acceleration, this or something like that, whatever. But I want to be thoughtful. I don't want to run into walls unnecessarily. But it does feel like we're about to, be all gas, no brakes to me.
Yeah. I think that's definitely what the new administration is going to push for.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Man, anything else you want to say? I mean, we've been riffing for a while, but look, thank you.
No, I mean, I agree. I feel like lucky to have you as a thought partner and to be in. I mean, listen, there is no other position besides early stage investor in healthcare in the U.S. that I'd want to do. I mean, it's the job that I think is going to be a lot of fun for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And acceleration is likely to happen. In healthcare, I think we need to be careful about protecting the patients and the caregivers, because for a long time, having an empathetic caregiver, even if my plan is decided by AI, I still want a nurse or a doctor helping me think through it, listening to me, reflecting back that they understand my emotions. Maybe a robot could do that eventually, but for a long time, there's going to be people that are needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of a fun place where we can accelerate and bring lots of change and improvements, but we're still going to have a lot of roles for people to help.
Well, I'm looking forward to continuing to work through this all with you for another 100 episodes at least. A historic moment in modern time.
Yeah.
Not just the second successful presidential election for Donald Trump, but truly a decisive victory. Truly a decisive victory.
Yeah, no question. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what the Dems do in the next 2 years. But my belief is we're going to be in populist world. There's going to be
a minute.
There's going to be a bunch of young, talented, liberal Democrats that want to change the party into something that can compete. I don't know what shape that'll take.
It's kind of funny, right? I mean, I was a kid when it happened, but I look at this and I'm like, this must be what it felt like in Reagan win one.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's the exact thing I was
This
thinking.
must be what it felt like in Reagan win one.
Yeah, Reagan Democrats.
Yeah. which then started a run.
Yeah.
A run.
Yeah, and I think Clinton
Clinton broke the run. Yeah, Clinton broke the run, but that was 12 years. That was 12 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, JD Vance is young. He's the youngest vice president ever.
Oh yeah. I mean, here's the thing. When you string together 3 terms, the problem is you get all the baggage of anything bad that happened, and you're not fully in control. So bad things are going to happen, and demography is going to shift, and blah blah blah. Right. So no matter how good a job you do, I don't care which party you're in, eventually you're going to get fired for a prolonged period of time. Yeah. And it feels to me like the Democrats have arrived at their moment of being fired for a prolonged period of time. That's like, if I had to kind of try to objectively view it. Because I'm trying to step back from this whole thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you couldn't respond, the Dems couldn't respond to Reagan until like a whole generation of people had left office and there was entirely new people there. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'd like there to be, 2 sides debating gets to a better answer. So I don't know. I'm a free markets guy, but I want the Dems to be strong and
oh no,
push on that.
Listen. I think anyone who values democracy and believes America has the best system in the world wants 2 strong parties. Yeah. Even if one party kind of slaps the other party around for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, that causes the reaction.
You don't want the party to go away.
Yeah.
You want the party, go soul search, find out who you're going to be, get a whole new crop of leaders.
Yeah, that
and
creates
come back
an opportunity for the governor of Arkansas to be president.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And who now today, back then was like this blue dog or whatever, right? And today is the establishment.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And today is the establishment, right?
It's kind of the innovator's dilemma. Like you get to be the incumbent, and then all of a sudden you don't change so much anymore.
Yeah. So overall, I choose to be long America and long on the American people, and believe we will figure this out. And clearly, I believe in innovation and entrepreneurship. And do I think every single policy is going to be awesome over the course of the Trump administration? Personally, no, I don't. But I think overall we will figure it out. And I think there are certainly things about a Trump administration that are going to be beneficial for America.
Yeah. The best thing for me personally is the clarity. Like just the fact that,
oh gosh,
whether you love the result or hate the result, there's a result 24 hours later. And now we can all plan for our life under the new administration. People were predicting months of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that we had this election and people got to vote. There's great turnout.
Great turnout.
And the Democrats will figure out something else. But right now, we're going to see how the Republicans do, and I'm excited to check it out. And there'll be a lot of healthcare to discuss and unpack and figure out.
Yeah, and for us, our job is to control that which we can control.
Right.
Right. I think that was the thing for me. I went to bed last night like, I live in Tennessee. Tennessee has placed its electoral college votes for sure. I already know what that looks like.
Yeah.
And look, I got to wake up, check on my parents, kiss my wife, come in here, build this company with you, be a good fiduciary for our limited partners, be a good board member for the companies where I'm serving on boards. It's like, I got work to do.
Right.
I got work to do. It's just like yesterday, today, I got work to do, And so you focus on that which you can control.
Yeah. That's right. Well, we'll talk about this every week. Another 100 episodes coming in the next couple of years.
Thanks for everything you did to make it possible for us to get here.
Yeah.
All right. See you next week.